everyone. Welcome to the second day of this portrait. My intent today is really make the light go to the full expression, color go to the full expression, and let the rest of the portrait, shadows, clothing, hair, background, support that beautiful flow that we will create. I will take a little bit of my medium and looking at the code, maybe start with the shadow shapes and the cast shadows that I see by using transparent red oxide with a little bit of phthalo blue, finding the definition of the code just by applying the cast shadows. The shadow is thinner, and then there is another cast shadow right here, and it has a diagonal movement that will gain. And then generally, I just want the coat to be a little darker value. And I also want to create maybe more texture or more interest in paint. And a shoulder here. And yes, I put the cast shadows, but in some way I took them off, not necessarily on purpose, just happened, and I can go and reinstate them. But I think darkening the coat was a good idea because now goes more together with the value of the beret and the hair. So the next thing is I'm going to go over the shadow shape. And as we said, that this portrait is a little different from what we've done before, because on this photograph, you see a lot of reflective light. And it's also, because of that, it kind of feels more cooler than it's warmer. So two things you can do. You can follow photography and paint what you see, or you can slightly adjust it and paint what you think would be better for the portrait. And I think I'm going to keep the shadow just slightly warmer and slightly darker. And I can always change my mind later on. No, that's a little too dark. Mixing just a little bit of white with cadmium red light. But as you can see, I'm just darkening this a little bit more. It doesn't mean that all of that shadow will remain that value, but for now, losing the definition between the jaw and the neck, making the shadow and the cast shadow be one shape, and connecting into the big grouping, passing a softer pressure on the edges, coming around the top plane and sliding to the side plane, and then maybe getting a little bit darker on this corner of her nose bridge and the eye, and maybe tiny bit more. And it's also mainly to just make the paint wet again so we can paint into it. So when we're painting a second layer, we do want to move the portrait forward and not just keep repainting what we've already done. Moving the portrait forward is making those adjustments that will make the painting better. Whether they all gonna stay to the end or we're gonna alter them as we paint and discover more and see more. that certainly can happen. I'm going to connect the ear that is in shadow to the mask and maybe just slightly change the temperature to be a little bit warmer. And then I'm going to add the yellow ochre into that darkness. And that darkness is transparent red oxide, yellow blue, yellow ochre, cadmium red light. And then I'm just going to pick up expression of the hair, making brush stroke. And this is mainly because I feel that color-wise, it really connects to the shadow. And then later on, we can bring greenness to the hair, but and going over the background, creating a brushstroke with less pressure. So again, everything we've done so far is to bring the unity to the different parts so we can really work on making things more different in the area of the light. As I was looking at the painting, I do feel that this background not really benefiting the face as it is now. So I'm going to keep that in mind. That close relationship to the background is making the light recede into the distance rather than being helped and be pushed away from it. So either I make my light more colorful or I make my background different. So taking lead white, bringing a lot of the paint in. So this is going to be my story of shadows and dark. And now I'm going to develop story of light. And this is where the mixing is. And that is why I'm bringing the main ingredients of lead white, which symbolize the lightest light that I can get, in a very generous way, because I'll be mixing into that all the way through, creating a family of this light with a lot of cousins that are a little pink, a little yellow, a little purple, and all the beautiful variations of it. So first, I'm going to start again repeating my flow, and now really keeping in mind that my light is starting from the right hand side. So moving from right to left, the light becomes a little weaker, and then leaving enough space for a turn of the form, for transition. So using cadmium red, again, always introducing the color to the side. And if the brush doesn't move, maybe it just needs a little help of the medium. Not too much, just a little bit. So I want this portrait look lit up. And I already darkened my shadows relative to my reference. So my contrast is already slightly more than what we see in the reference. I also want to keep my forehead more on the yellow color family and not allow too much pink into it. So here I am adding a little bit more color to that part of the forehead because the weight of the hair prevent the light being the brightest, which is usually the case, that the forehead being the biggest single shape on the face can attract and reflect more light. It also for the reason that it's a harder surface, and the harder the surface, the light can push itself out a little bit more rather than the soft tissues. And I am going to mix a little bit more red, and I'm going to just give it a little bit more push to the frontal lobe. And then I am going back to my shadow, and I'm going to create that cast shadow from the hair. Soften the edge slightly because the hair is not a very solid object, and it's a little bit further away from the forehead. It's not really compressed into it or pushed into it. So even though it's a cast shadow, it can have softer edge because of those factors. And here I'm adding a little bit more purple. I can even add a little bit of alizarin. So little, remember alizarin is inky color. It has a very strong tinting power. So you can just use a pin drop of it and it would be more than enough. And with alizarin and combination of a little bit of gray or gray purple, whatever you have, we can add to the transitional area and maybe just to desaturate that purple, I'm going to add a little bit more yellow into it. Yellow and purple being opposite colors, they're going to cancel each other out to being more gray. Just making passage and softening this edge. So for now, what happened is we gave a little more color to the forehead. And now I'm going to come back and put more yellow. Boy, very strong. Put more yellow, maybe just a little alizarin. I really need more space, so I'm going to start a little bit to the side. So because I brought so much yellow into my paint and my white is transparent and my yellow is cadmium, it certainly just became overpowering. And I had to start a little bit from the side. I'm going to add a little bit of cadmium yellow to warm up some of that and trickle that down and lighten some of the part of the forehead. And I think maybe allowing a little bit more alizarin into my mixture also just, no, that didn't work out. It's too cool. A little bit warmer. And I just see if this stroke compresses and pushes my highlight where there is too much separation, then I need to open the flow and connect them a little more. That's better. A little bit more light on the top of eyebrow and a little bit more here, and even maybe in this part more away from the light. It will be just slightly quieter and a little bit more purplish. When I'm doing that, I'm very conscious not to over sharpen this edge because you don't want your eyebrows to look like they are drawn in or tattooed. And this is one of the strongest light we have on her cheek, falling and then changing into a little bit more coolness to the edge, and then using a little more cadmium rather than alizarin into the light, warming this more. That's not enough. So I'm going to go different direction. And that is too much. And that feels close to being right. More white, always adding more white if I'm running out. And then, so I've done a bit more work on the forehead. I might still adjust things as the painting developing and the light story developing. And then what I'd like to do is come back to the next lightest part of the face. And it's definitely the bony part of the nose. Highlight here And then take a little bit of gray. I'm looking for a slightly greener, so yellow ochre with yellow. I'm hoping to get a little bit hint of greenness, and I might just use it more of blue. I'm gonna try this, and I'd like to bring a little bit more light. Yes, that's not bad. A coolness to the side plane here and connect it to the side plane of the nose, the bone here called maxilla, connecting the side plane to the flow of light, and then coming around, and then noticing if there is any other place where I can give that note of color, maybe with a little more stronger hue. No, that's getting a little bit too cool and too colorful. So I'll probably adjust some of it and then leave some of it in. And that tends to be the story of painting, that we make a mark and then we consider if we like it or not. And maybe some of it will stay and some of it will have to be adjusted. I think painting from a photograph is very challenging. It's probably the hardest thing to do because the temptation of just copying the local colorations of the reference is quite hard to resist. And you have to just be very aware that you're not matching value to value, but you are looking at the face and saying, okay, how am I doing with that flow? Does it flow? Maybe this edge is just slightly too sharp and it focuses the attention there too much. So if you remember to catch yourself and come back to painting the flow of light and their relationship to the shadow, then you will be in much better place than just keep painting what you see. One thing I know that in a photograph, we might trust everything because we just know photograph is real. That person is real. But in a painting, there is a possibility of the artist's mistake. And so when things look right in a photograph, it doesn't mean they're gonna look right in a painting. So that alone should discourage you from being true to photograph. But again, sometimes we do that almost subconsciously. Okay, so I put this in and then I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is very strong. I have to push it back, and warm it up so it reads like a part of the shadow. Doesn't need to come that fast. And maybe before I put that little detail of definition of tear dark, maybe what I need to do is settle on what exactly would be this value, where it will have to kind of be. Was it too dark? Was it warm enough? Can it connect here a little bit to the eyeball? And can I just remove some of the sharpness here by connecting it with a little bit more purple coloration, which will be repeated in my eyeball. So they're gonna have this little color relationship, and hoping that therefore this almost gonna open up. I wanna check is now when things become a little bit cooler, a little bit lighter, do I have enough warmth and strength of the shadow to keep that form rounding. So, and if I don't, then I just come and I put a little warmer, darker stroke to push the space back. Separate this a little more from the darkness of eyebrow, connected to the shadow of eyelid. Just slightly more. This shape is under the eyebrow, and with the tilt of her head and the structure of her face, it almost feels like it doesn't. Let's make it a little bit cooler, give it a little more depth. Okay, a little warmer as well. So Terra Rosa into my shadow shape, bring a little, but we don't want to make lines, we want to make shapes. So be aware if you're making too many linear brushstroke, then see how else you can make that work better. So instead of line, it's more of a maybe a triangular shape. So if your line has a little more change in its width, it's getting more narrow, and then it's getting a little bit wider, then it will not read linear in the painting. So I am too dark here, too green, but I like the greenness. I just color corrected with a little warmer. Let's keep painting our flow of light, and just a little before I'm gonna put the corner of the eyebrow here. Again, it's very soft. It's nothing too dark of the value. And when the eyebrow turns, because the plane turned into temple plane, then you want to have that corner defined. And I think I'm just going to come back to a little bit warmer because it will have a little more depth in the corner of that eyeball. Yes, that's better. Correct the drawing here by pushing that corner down. Keeping the shadows more together. And then I'm just gonna hint on a little bit of the warmer tear dark right here. And of course, it end up being a little bit too strong. So taking and bringing just slightly more light. And again, that end up being too strong. It's not that maybe it's too strong, but it's too much paint quality. So I'm gonna take some of that paint away, and you can see how I use my brush as a scraper or scooper by coming to the canvas 45-degree, and then you can just use your point to move the paint in any direction that you want. So we're not painting flatter, we're painting more 45-degree, and that helps to keep changing the shapes and the placement of pieces of paint. I may come with a little bit more warmth, yellow ochre or cadmium yellow deep with just a tiny bit of red, and make sure it's lit up, not too dark, and just bring that holding of the cheekbone. Okay. Need a little more warmer color. on the edge of the light. This is where I need the green. So if you have phthalo green, it's just like alizarin. It tends to be such a strong green. So we can't use it just by itself. But if we take a tiny bit of it into yellow ochre, it right away warms it up. And if we add a little gray, it also desaturates. So that's the amount of green that I need. Just a real diversion from phthalo that I have on my palette. And I tend to like having phthalo. And even that is too green. So again, using my reds to modify it and creating enough of kind of a, yes, that's what I'm looking for. And it's quite less light. So I just want to make that change a little gradual, like that. And then that's what we're going to use and break when we paint this light, just as to remember. I'm going to break that in, and just to repeat that, I can use a little bit here, but maybe slightly more yellow quality. So as we growing the paint, we also calibrating the colors and recycling the colors. The reason why I really needed to repeat something somewhere else there. So this is not the lonely color by itself. This has somewhere a relative, a derivative of that, something that belongs more than just one piece of the paint. Because if the color only belongs to one piece, I think it always will look foreign and strange. It needs to be integrated in more than one area and repeated and recycled. So I'm taking the same yellowish green and I'm moving. Let's come back and now we'll revisit the eye. And the only thing I want to add is softening the edge of that eye. And I just darken slightly with the purple, and then I'm gonna come back and pull the dark and maybe just make a little bit more direction here, and then come back again, make this just slightly darker, pushing it back. I also connecting this more together by darkening, just taking some of the details to less. This is just pushing a little bit lower as a shape. Minimizing, making this space of light a little smaller by putting the dark. Okay, so let's travel to the other side of the face, and then we can paint the end of the nose and the muzzle piece together. Before I get to the light, let me just see if we can put a little bit more reflective light into this. And I want to be just very carefully so I don't destroy my shadow. And that's usually my main concern. So that's what explains this purple coloration and the cooler tones in the shadows. Almost to the point where this edge is completely washed away. Purple, too much color. Color will always come forward. If it's in the area of colorlessness, it will feel like a foreign agent. When we talk about painting, painting can be simplified to couple concepts to understand it a little bit easier. One is whatever is the same comes together, whatever has the same qualities, whether it's a color or value or both, brushstroke, texture, even the shape. Our mind will organize it in such way that it will feel that they will move towards the same place, the same depth. But if we paint things more different, then instead of coming together, grouping, organizing, moving towards each other, then they would push themselves away, more apart. We can use that concept to really explain a lot of decisions that we do in the painting, if not all of them. Here, I want this to come forward. I want this edge to be with my warm, a little bit darker shadow back. And just hint on tear dark. Let's paint our eyeball again with a little bit of a gray purple. One very common mistake with painting eyes is not to give enough color to the sclera, white area of the eyeball. And so if you make it colorless and bright, then it will come too close away from the cavity where the eye should sit. And so to push it back, we use a little bit more color. And it usually has more than one color. It has some yellow, it has some pinks, it has some purples. So try to see more color in the white of the eye. And it's also important because then making a softer edges becomes a little bit easier. Definitely the shapes of the eyes a little bit too different. One is a little bigger, one is slightly smaller, and that's okay. That's usually the case because one is further away, one is closer, but you just have to gauge if this is really case, so they don't look like they don't belong to the same face. And it also creates expression. So we want to make sure that if she looks a certain way in a certain direction, that you want the eyes look in that direction and have that expression, because truly this is what makes the portrait emotional, and that's what we connect to is the eyes. All right, So what I'm doing is just bringing a little bit warmer color forward here to bring this closer to me. The same cooler colors of the side plane come here to that side plane, pulling it off. That's too dark. So every mark I make, I just reevaluate if it's correct in value. Yeah, let's see, I'm in too much of a cool family, too much alizarin. And in order for that fold to feel like it's folding, it needs to be a little bit warmer, have a little more color. Let me rethink what these edges are doing, because with darkening my shadow shape, it really not describing my planes very well. So let's see. I'll use a little bit of a shadow. So what I'm seeing here, it's this top plane is illuminated by another light source. And it's a bit of a dilemma, but the way this design right now, it won't work anyway. I like to bring a little bit more cheekbone coming out and going behind this. So I think I'm gonna do this, change this, open more, and bring this towards, and maybe just almost drop that light down. Yeah, that is more reflective light. So you can see how much the shadow is getting a bit more and more washed out. We'll try it. And then if that doesn't work, we'll come back to a little bit more darkness. I think that's all I'm gonna do though. I'm using a little bit of yellow green, which is pretty warm. And I think that helps me to keep it a little bit more shadowy rather than using purple. And I've used some yellow green here as well. So they kind of connect more. Then the same light, the same cooler light that we see coming to the side plane, there is a little bit of it in the corner of the chin, coming around the box of the chin. And here getting the cast shadow from the neck a little bit darker here, because it's right under, while getting it a little bit warmer and darker right at the base. And that way, this will look more reflective. Maybe the light from the background. Again, this might be a reflection from pearl. You can see how some edges of the jar is lost, and then some edges are more visible by the light reflected. So it's that game that we play. Now you see it, now you don't. So you become a magician and you saying, don't look here, this is not important, but look here. And that's what the function of the edges are. They have more than one function, but definitely they create space by creating illusion of coming in and out of the space. So really helping the form to breathe and live in its space, creating variations of edges is very, very important, because we are painting a movement of light. And anytime something moves, that requires change. And so if your edge doesn't change for too long, that means that there is no movement. There's nothing that changing. I think it's working better. Now I'm just gonna keep painting the cheek and the nose and the muzzle, and then come back to lips, and then get back to the light of the color. I do want to correct is carve out a little bit space here, give it to the ear, and then since we're talking about the edge here, there's a little bit of a light behind, so it opens this edge a little more, just in a very small space. And then the ear becomes a little bit more lit up, and again it has this local purple coloration. I'm just gonna lose or soften the information on the ear, because again the ear is just a secondary. We don't want the painting to be about ears, so we keep them just nicely tucked in back with just the hints of what they are. And there we have maybe a hair coming, tucking, and a little bit more definition of the edge of the head. And then we can keep extending the light of the hair, of that curl, folding back. And here we can see how, again, since we talked about the edges, we can see how this edge is open to the light, so the value of the forehead and the hair are very similar, so the edge can be open while the shape next to it, and it doesn't need to be so dark as I have it. Ooh, too green. So I'm using yellow ochre into a little bit of a into that head. A little more medium. Curls back, and then it curls back here. Here we kind of are starting to feel a fuller picture of the hair as they come out, curl behind and curl over. even though we have a cutout image, I think we can easily fill up the gaps of what happens. And if it's still challenging for you, then just look for the reference that may be very close to what you're painting and take it from there. So we don't need to paint chopped off heads just because that's what the photographer chose. Again, it might be very good for photography, but not so good for painting. At least for more traditional painting, it doesn't really happen till much later, till Impressionists, that artists started to consider taking things out of the canvas, suggesting that they are still continuing behind the scene. And of course, you can think of Degas' dancers, where you have half of the foot showing up from the frame, coming out of the frame of the painting. And that's really was influenced by Japanese woodcuts, that idea, and also, of course, by development of photography. So I'm playing with it a little too much. Maybe I'm procrastinating because the other areas are harder, but I really should get going there and then come back to this area. So we know that the bottom plane of the eyelid is in shadow. We also have a very warm shadow of these two divisions of the planes, and the almost like a eye bag with just more white, a little more color right next to transition, breaking through here, opening this edge. Let's place it here, get a little adhesion, and just slide, bring a little bit of coolness here on the top plane. Now let a little gray purple into transition. That's just slightly too cool. Little bit, leave the coolness. I will leave some of that coolness. Come in more light. Again, always adding more light, more white. And then again, just remixing a little bit of yellow ochre in there. Just a hint. Trying it. A little, I can use a little more red. Warmer in that area because it's the bottom of the cheek, so there is a lot of soft tissue. So we can maybe have a little more color. It's also closer to the shadow shape away from the light, so we don't need as much of light. Just get a little more coloration of pink on that cheek. And then simplify my shadow shape under the nose. Making the bottom of the nose nice and warm. Again, just like the side plane has received so much reflective light, this shadow also is staying a little bit on the cooler side and not as dark. So, but careful not to put too much coolness in it, because then it will stop looking like a shadow and will be like just a color spot. Getting a direction of the nostril. Don't put too much blackness, rather have warmth, because that's what will give you depth. And as I said that, I didn't listen to my own advice, so I'll have to come in and add a little bit more warmer cadmiums into it. Okay, that's looking better, and you can really see that orangeness on the other nostril, that it's much warmer. Let's think about the nose here, because in the photograph it's so lit up and it really has very little coloration. But I think for the sake of just moving this nose a little bit more forward, I'm going to give it a little bit warmer place next to shadow. And then I can just take the top plane of the nose, of the bowl, more in light. Just shape a little bit of the side of the nose with more color, and allow a little bit less color to the nostril of the nose. It's a first shape facing the light, so it will be a little cooler relative to. And then the other nostril, I guess, to be consistent with all this purplish reflective light, will receive a little more purple coloration, and side plane here will receive the same purple coloration. And again, I keep coming back to the side. Do we need a little bit more highlight on the nose? Yeah, let's reinforce the highlight, just white and yellow. Scoop it up to more, and then we'll move it a little bit away. Or Wow, that certainly did the trick. Maybe a little bit too bright. And what I need to do is take a palette knife and just cut my highlight that was sitting in the wrong place. And then it was a little bit too much to the side. So this is better, but it's a little too shiny, like she has a wet nose, the skin. So I will just slightly reduce. And sometimes highlights, like anything else, can take more than one try. We can try to put them with our palette knife. So I added a little bit of darkness, but now I just need to bring it so it's not a line. And then let's paint. Now when the top of the nose is feeling better, we just paint the top of the muzzle. She has lips that come very close. The distance between the nose and the lips are not that much. And she has a very full lips. And maybe this is just tiny, too much light. Now when face got a little bit more color in, we can reduce that, bring a little bit of warmer down plane to the cheek, and separate the muzzle by coloration, having it a little more yellow, putting a little highlight where canine tooth is, bringing a little bit of the highlight to that scoop of the lip, allowing it to kind of go a little bit high. And then redoing the lips. And I think with that, I'm just going to simplify them back again. Yeah, it feels like this would be for me a bit of the easier way. I just slightly darken them and then bring a little bit more light to the top of the lips, so the light of the muzzle can just slightly fall over and illuminate them. And also it really helps with the edges of the lips, so we don't have a very defined, sharp. And this is kind of a very common mistake of thinking of the lips being more colorful than they are. The strongest color, the most saturated color, usually is placed next to cast shadows. And again, it's because right here on the top of the plane, and then the darkest part of the lip is usually a bit at the corner and a little in the middle, and then again at the corner. And then between them, you can kind of wash out this line and lose it, because our eyes are very intelligent. They connected to a big machine of our brain, and the brain wants to take a part of seeing. So you have to create an opportunity for the viewer to use their brain to see your painting. And that's what makes a realistic experience, because we do that in life. That's exactly how we see things. We don't see every detail, every piece. We simplify our information and the process of seeing by allowing our brain computer to fill the gaps. So if you made the darker accent on the lips in the beginning, middle, and the end, we will know that there is a connection, and we'll make that connection better than what we can with the brush, and it will be more realistic. So always look for things that you can describe in lesser degree, leaving some of that description to the viewer. Be more mysterious. Don't try to put every detail. It's not good for the painting. What I was working on is putting a little highlights on the lips to highlight at top of the curvature of the, almost like a pillar shapes. So the lip consists of two pillars coming together on the bottom lip, not the top. And that's why you have often two highlights, because there's two different shapes. And then this edge of the lip can be completely open to the skin, to the swelling of the side plane. So this can be continuous, and you can just maybe just sharpen the edge of the low lip, but then open it up the flow here. So what we have here is a reflective light from the white of the color. So in this painting, we truly have a lot of reflective light. I can put this in and then see if this is something I like it and I'd like to keep it, or maybe make it less. Okay. Before I do this, let's just see how we can finish the lips. Oops. By opening a little bit of this flow down. And by opening a little bit of this flow down. So this is a light that kind of comes around and on the chin of the box, there is a little piece of light, and we'll give it more color. Maybe not too much. That's too much. And we don't want to sharpen the edge, so coming back and just softening this edge by passing the brush along. And if that is not enough, you can come back and get a little purple gray on the edge of it. Balance it with maybe something that can be a little warmer on the top of that chin. And again, something that is cooler because the short is reflecting into the skin. And that's, I definitely got, I just did it too much, so I'm trimming it down. How much light to put on the neck as well. And before that, maybe just correcting the drawing of that neck like that, allowing the shadow of the color be a little bit more, a little darker. And right now, I think the neck is too close to the color and the value of so I'd like to try something that's a little bit more, slightly darker, a little bit more colorful. And then, yeah, even that, just a little bit more greener here. And then get a little bit more warmer and warmer yellow, but keeping it darker than the face. So settling down, and then we can see if it worked or not by darkening. And can I bring a little bit more? Maybe cooling the front of the neck. But keeping the cylinder of the neck. And then just in terms of drawing, just correcting this a little bit too heavy, making it slightly shorter. And then what I'd like to do is just get this hint of that shadow a little bit more. And it's slightly more than what I see, but I think I like it a little better. And then just a little warmer, almost the lip itself reflecting to the top plane. Getting a little highlight on that edge as well, just like on the other edge, but just controlling this edge, becoming softer. Now looking that maybe this can get slightly less darker. Again, the top lip is darker than the front lip. So if we lighten that, we probably good idea to lighten at least the top plane of the lower lip, just to show the passing of the light. On the top plane, and then allow a little bit more color right at the flatness of that frontal plane of the lip. So I'm sorry, I said a frontal plane, but I meant the top plane, the narrow top plane of the lip, which is where the light flows. And that's where you'll see a highlight. And it's a little bit diagonal because that cushion of the fat tissue of the lip is shaped and has a diagonal movement. And then again, coming back to the light. Oh, no, too much. And shape it. And then it's okay that it was too much. Let's turn this oops into our advantage and allow that light flow into the edge and just wash out this edge. And it's not easy to wash out. That edge just wants to stay strong. And what do I see? I see too strong of a transition right here. So I would like to soften that a little bit more. That's better. I would like to make a little bit more of a step here. That's kind of in the most protruded area of the shadow, under the most protruded area of the cheekbone. And it kind of balances this movement as well. And it connects into this little triangle that holds that light. The light on the top, maybe coming from a cooler ceiling, is curving on top of this form, trying to get behind. There it's coming, and then falling in its warmer expression into the jaw, kind of a squarish jaw, and then losing its definition. But I'm gonna take a little bit of white, titanium white, and yellow, and just a little bit change this direction. That's better. And I like the light there. But I like it with a little bit more color. Yeah, and the shadow of the short against that light feels darker and a little warmer. So I want to put a little bit of green, similar to what I used on the cheek. Now I'm going to use the same one here. And I'm going to cool off this cheek. And this is because this is going to be a white coming through from Now let's work a little bit more on the environment, the background, the details of the highlights of the hair, and then we'll look at the face again. We're gonna paint the color of her shirt, and here I want to show you how to make opaque and semi-transparent fabric. So first I'm gonna paint opaque fabric, and here you can see I'm bringing even more white, and I will probably want to use a little bit of titanium white because just to get more opacity. And I will get my coolest cadmium yellow light mixed to the side, so again just gauging how strong it is, and it is strong. Loading up my brush very generously with paint. Let me show you. It just has a lot of paint. And coming to the most lit up area of the color and just making a brush stroke. And then down. And then there is a little bit, just a slight change of plane right here. I'm using too much color right away. It's not subtle enough. Okay, because I want this light to be as flat as possible, and using even a little bit more light with less yellow and lifting this up, and then maybe just using the same paint for this detail. And I changed its shape, not because I really want to, but because it happened, and it's okay. I will carve it out with my shadow shape and spreading the light and putting a little bit of light behind, and in. And now I want to show you that the little ruffles that we have is single layer of the fabric and not a double layer. So what I'm gonna do is pick up some of my purple, mix it in, and I'm just gonna try to see if that's gonna work. Maybe a little bit more. And making a few folds, and making the design of the fabric match the folds. So little variations of in and out, coming back here and pulling, and then maybe with the smaller brush and a little bit more light, just breaking the line here to the top of the folds, a little more light, and then the same thing is yet just the edge look a little bit more opaque by allowing to be slightly more lit up. And if I exaggerate some of the folds and I don't like it, then I'll just come, use my dark brush, and then correct the drawing, carve it out a better shape. But I like a little exaggeration here. I don't mind. And then maybe taking yellow ochre into just a tiny bit of phthalo blue and a tiny bit of Venetian red and bringing more light. I might use a little more red. Pull the brush stroke up. Bring a little bit more red, yellow ochre. Change. This is more shadowy side, so I might not have as much here. Just possible right here. A little bit over the shoulder. I don't want to get it too light everywhere because I like the darkness. And then where I've missed a little bit of the shape, the direction of this shape being more downwards, then I can just come back and put a cast shadow back. And then and here, maybe get some of that light connected just in the smaller space. Open this edge and make few brush strokes. Soften this edge. I will bring a little bit more violet, and now painting the shadow, and I already have quite a violet there, so let's see how that will play out. Maybe a little bit more violet with even a little bit of yellow ochre. Now I can see that the shadow here can be even a little darker. Too much color, come back to less. Come back to light and shape the shadow a little differently. And maybe with the background, I will just make a mark, but I might just lower this to the background. And go just like a little bit of, and then the shoulder drops. Shoulder drops. This side, this has a little bit more color. And I think it's better come with the edge and pull it up. And then it goes to more shadow. So a little bit more in purple. And even more bluish purple. To show that it goes behind the color. And then with a little bit more blue, make an edge, then get to the white, Might have overused the blue. Let's see. Color corrected with more violet. More of this light coming together to this shape. Maybe tucking in just a few small folds, just not making them the same, bringing a little warmer piece of light here and bringing a little more piece of light right here. It's like they're sharing this light, and then coming back to a blue violet shadow. Just maybe not so much dark, because it's a white short, but it really making it stand out, adding a little bit more purplish coloration, and then with a tiny bit of blue coming to the light on the other edge, and just, and with more white really coming close to the start of that shadow and making light. And there is a good chance we might repaint this again. There's always a chance. And I personally, if I know that I can make it better, it's very hard for me to let go. I will rather spend the time, even though it's already a sold piece and it's ready to go home and the people liked it, but I don't like it. I just have a hard time letting go of something that I'm not happy with. So I will take a chance and repaint it, send a new picture. And for the most part, it worked out. I think I had one time when the person changed their mind, and that was okay with me because I was much happier with the piece. So it found another owner. It's, my feeling about pieces being sold, that in invisible ink, they already have a name where they're supposed to go and who's supposed to have them. And it might not be at that show or at the time when you want it to be, but it will find its place. So there's no reason to push that. Just let it develop in a way it will. Again, it's not always easy though. Sometimes the ego gets involved and you start doubting yourself if you even should be painting. But at the end of the day, we paint because truly there's nothing else better to do than what we're doing. We are really lucky to have that. So who gets to play with the paint all day long and be on their own space? It's just perfect. I feel that this edge doesn't look right here. So a little softer. And coming back, coming back, coming back. That's better. Even this might be a little bit too harsh. So in fabric, the sharp edges really belong to the cast shadows. the form shadows have softer edges. And so the way you have folds is that you have a sharp edge and then a softer edge and then a sharp edge and then a softer edge. And that's how the fold come to be. And of course you can, using highlights on the top of the heels of the folds, just take a little bit warmer color and warm up slightly where it touches the brown coat. Bring that coloration in to make it look more transparent. And I'm gonna just take my transparent red oxide with a little bit of reddish orange or red, and I'm just gonna pass it on the edge and see if that's something that works. So I want the shape to be contrasted, but I don't think I need it so much. And then I might take a little bit of violet and just add on the edge and make it look like it has a corner here and then disappeared. So that's open for interpretation. You can just keep that as a solid dark shape and it might be just beautiful. So I went back and I darkened some of it and I kind of brushed over some of the hair edges so they appear softer and more lost. And then maybe I will take a little bit more yellow ochre into my greenish red and just extend some of that hair into that wet darkness. Oh, well, no, it's probably a little too dark. Lose that edge. At the same time, since I have that paint, do I need to maybe bring, no, that's too dark. Bring a little bit of more really didn't want to go that dark. Let's just put a little more highlights on the hair. Now when we lighten some of them a little more, just to get again, I don't think we need too many highlights, but since we are doing them, we can talk about highlights as something that really catches the corners. We'll take a little bit of darkness and just put the pupils, the accents inside of the eye, and then we'll take a little bit of the color, and you really can make her any color eyes you want because they're pretty dark, but I'm going to take a darker gray and give her a little bit of that coloration. And the reason why you're not seeing so much of the color in her eye, because there is no highlights in her eyes. And the color of the eyes we see through exiting light. That's, we get the most information about the color. So if we don't have a highlight, then becomes harder to know what color of the eyes she really has. But, and I'm gonna do that for you just for demonstration purposes, and then maybe take it out. If I do put a highlight, and I have a blue and white here, and let's say the light is coming this direction, so it will have to be sitting here. The color of the eyes will be more evident on the opposite side of that highlight. And then we just pick up a little bit of more depth, a little bit of cooler color, put it right next to highlight, making it a little smaller, putting a little shadow underneath the eyelid, and then again, maybe putting a little more color right here opposite of the highlight, so you can see how much more that eye looks more colorful. Painting eyes are like painting grapes. They are translucent objects. Light comes in to the lens, it leaves a highlight, and light comes out of it, leaving exit light, making this a little bit darker still, warmer and darker. What about the neck? Then we get a little bit darker shadow shape right here, just in a few spaces. That's better. Adding a little bit. Almost cooler reflective light. So at some point, finishing the painting will become more like, let me try this, let me try that, see what looks better, and then leaving that version in. But till we explore possibilities, it feels that the painting is not done yet. So I guess finishing is not so much about copying what you see to the point where you completely satisfied with what you got because it's so close to what the photograph is. But you're saying, okay, but what if I, instead of cooler one, now I'll give it a little bit stronger, but with touch of more yellow in it. Did I went a little bit too much? Should I soften it and maybe bring a little bit more color at the part where it's now in the light of the background? So for contrast, keeping this in the edge more. The next step is to solve the background. So one possibility is just go darker and maybe a little bit more color on the background. And another is just stay light and maybe cooler and lose some edges. I don't have an answer, but I think what I'm gonna do is explore two things. Is possibly make this background a little bit warmer using the same ochre and then breaking through the edges. treating this edge of shoulder in and out of space. Adding more light to the coat and therefore making it a little bit more disappearing. Painting this into the short, painting this maybe with a little bit more light as well. Much light. Maybe taking some gray. So I'm still very much kind of looking to which direction to go with the background. Do I go light? So I think I might also try to go a little bit more color. And then find the way to bring those together, which is right now escapes me. Remember, we let out some paint here, so guiding this in, guiding this in. You can treat that as something like a cast shadow. Or just transition to the light. But I like a little bit more contrast in the painting. So let's see, take a little bit more medium, maybe a little bit more light, a little bit more green, and getting more desaturated with this, getting a little more white, coming to this side and having more light. I might speed up this part so you don't have to watch the grass grow. So I can tell you right now that I'm not crazy about this direction. So I'm just gonna lose it in the background. But I find it kind of nice with the background getting darker and the edges of her coat being more lost. So I do like that. Okay, so maybe something like this. Maybe a small sky hole in her hair, the edges of the hair, more wispy, more softer. It's never end. We have a few wisps here, few wisps here. If they get a little bit too big, that's okay. We can cut them in more. And then taking a brush and just get some of these edges even softer looking. That's why we put some of that red on the top, so we can actually bring that edge a little bit more together and lose it, and maybe the shape itself is a little different. I think maybe a little bit more rounded. And so a little back and forth on that edge actually makes it a better edge. And see if you maybe want to push that even a little bit more. Or later on decide to not push it more and darken it back in. It's possible. I don't know the answer. I wish I did, but I always try a few things before I settle on one. What we want to avoid is doing the same thing every painting, because what worked for one painting may not work for another. So, okay. So the last thing I'm going to show you is the birth of the pearl. So that's why I needed to have a background to know really what the pearl will do, because the pearl is very reflective, much more than the skin. It's shiny, so the shadows tend to be warmer, reflected of all the color. And then it's also iridescent. What does iridescency means? Iridescency is when it's not a pigment. There is no pigment that's called iridescent. Iridescence is a quality of light that only happens when a certain material, and in this case it's a shell, right, has such a physical structure that it reflects the light, allows the light to come in, and then with that structure it reflects back some of the waves, and it amplifies the color to much stronger color. And when you look at it from one side, you see one color and or many colors. But when you shift your perspective, you may see a totally different colors. And it's often in one highlight, you will see a very different colors that you usually wouldn't quite put it together. So you might see like a phthalo green, and you can see sometimes a very strong pink and a violet and a warmer shadow, warmer reflective shadow. And it's very much depends what it reflects. So if the shadow is reflecting from this cooler color of the short, then it will be maybe just slightly cooler, but still relatively to the highlight, very, very warm. And the shadows can be darker than what you expect. They look light, but in fact, to support such a strong highlight, they need to have enough contrast. And in the highlight, you are extremely generous with the paint. I think that makes it more beautiful. And so combination of those colors is what creates iridescency and pearlescency. And the pearlescency is really kind of a variation of iridescency. So again, we can play with it a little more, a little less, but I think that's starting to look like a pearl. Yeah, we can maybe reflect even a little more yellow. Oh, that's too strong. So it's always looking for that balance. And sometimes instead of that shadow getting darker, maybe just getting the background look lighter will be better. And then warm my ear behind it. Here I need to maybe cut the ear a little closer. And just looking at the portrait and asking myself, what if this would be my last brushstroke that I was allowed to make? What would be that brushstroke is about? What do I absolutely want to change in the painting? And make that brushstroke to be in peace with it. I certainly cannot stop with one. I will have to ask for more and more. But at some point, we have to stop and, aha, I see a couple things more. Not that it's truly important, but you know what? I think I never really came back to the neck. So I'm gonna just come back and bring a little bit more light at the base of the neck where there is more of the white color. And I'm gonna soften this to take my eye fit and maybe lose that to the background. Okay, I know I need to finish, but like all of a sudden you see more and more things to be done, to be played with, to have fun with. I want to stop here because I think we've reached a good point. What I would do is maybe move the camera away and work a little bit on the details of the eyes to bring them out. And then I will take a final picture for this video. But to summarize, what you want to do is paint each painting towards the next painting. If you've learned something from this painting that you can carry on to the next, that's already a success. So I wouldn't look at the painting and say, oh, I don't like it, I'm so disappointed and all that. No, what I would ask myself, what did I learn? Did I learn something new? And the things that I want you to really concentrate on learning is to using more paint, leaving brush strokes, always paint relationships of colors, values, edges, paint quality. And so you're not painting parts, pieces, and absolutes, but you always say, if I put this here, what does it do to this part? If I make this background fade away, how can it relate to this shoulder? If I paint so much light behind this dark shape, what would be a solution for the edge? Make it very sharp and graphic, or bring a little bit more color and light so it can just breathe and soften. So our eye doesn't focus on the edge, but more brought to the focal point, which is always eyes and expression and emotion in the portrait. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed painting with me. I hope that you've learned something. I do want to mention that I'm just started doing my YouTube channel. If you have more questions about something, see if maybe I have a movie placed on YouTube that can make it more clear, or you can always email me. Thank you so much again. Thank you for your support.